live from the World's Fair of Money, our first time. This is actually a Money Talks, but we are live streaming this to our regularly scheduled webinar, NumismaTalks. So welcome. I would just like to introduce our local representative of Pan Ben Costello. He's going to come up and introduce our speaker. So thank you.
Thank you, Paula. Welcome. Our topic this afternoon is cherry picking rare coins in 2023 and beyond, presented by Dennis Tucker. Rare and valuable die varieties are just waiting to be cherry picked, found by sharp-eyed collectors and bought for regular coin prices, hopefully. Today, we're going to explore cherry picking with special emphasis on half dimes, quarter dollars, and early 1800s to date. Also, Mercury and Roosevelt dimes will be included, Washington quarters, Liberty seated, and Barber coinage, and more. Our presenter is Dennis Tucker. Dennis has been a coin collector since his youth, when his big brother showed him a red book and gave him a 1937 Buffalo nickel. Today, he actively collects U.S. Mint commemorative medals and coins, European medals, Philippine coins struck under U.S. sovereignty, and coins and art medals designed and engraved by personal friends. In 2004, Dennis became the youngest publisher in the history of Whitman Publishing. He specializes in books on numismatics, banking, financial history, the American presidency, political and military history, and other non-fiction topics. Since 2016, he has been the numismatic specialist on the U.S. Treasury Department's Citizens Coinage Advisory Committee. I present to you Mr. Dennis Tucker.
Thank you, Vance. Thank you so much. I was curious to see how many people would show up for this talk. I figured if anything can pack a room, it'll be cherry picking. I've given some talks at coin shows where it's just me and the IT guy. And the IT guy wanders off every once in a while to smoke a cup of coffee or drink a cigarette. And by the way, if you notice what I did there, then you have exactly what it takes to be a good cherry picker. Attention to detail. Today I'm going to be talking about cherry picking, which is a way of looking for mistakes in coins. Mistakes that can translate, as Ben said, into big money. I'm going to talk about how these mistakes happen, why cherry picking has exploded into such a popular part of the hobby, what's going on in cherry picking today, and what the future might hold. I have been a collector since I was a kid, and I have the best job in the world as a publisher at Whitman Publishing. And I've had the opportunity to work on, I believe, now 5 volumes of the Cherry Picker's Guide, which is by J.T. Stanton and Bill Fiva. And in recent years, it's been edited in various volumes by Mike Ellis, Ken Potter, and Larry Briggs, all of them experts in the field of cherry picking and U.S. coins in general. So I'll start out with what is cherry picking. Cherry picking is a way of finding hidden treasure. Basically, it involves looking at coins that appear to be normal at first glance. You examine them for unusual features, little details that reveal a seemingly common coin to actually be a rare and extra valuable die variety. From there, it's the classic equation of buying low and selling high. You buy it for the normal coin price, or if you're really lucky, you pluck it from circulation for face value, and you resell it for the current market price of the properly identified variety. Of course, you can also cherry pick a coin and keep it for your own collection, and you'll always have the knowledge that you're smarter than the guy or the gal that you bought it from, and that's worth money, I think. If you're looking at older coins, you can cherry pick a dealer's inventory at a coin show, like here at the A&A, or you can cherry pick it in a coin shop. You can search online for coins that aren't properly identified, where the seller hasn't noticed a die variety detail. Bill Fiva recently told me about a friend of his who bought a raw 1961 proof Franklin $50 off eBay about 3 years ago for $45. He noticed it had a double die reverse. Bill advised him to get it professionally graded, which he did, and it came back as an NGC proof 68. Bill immediately told his friend he should send it to a major auction firm, which he did, and that $45 coin sold for $14,500. As Bill said, knowledge is power, but only if you use it. Rare varieties are found in modern coins too. You can search through your pocket change or your piggy bank or rolls of coins you get from your local credit union. You can look through bags or rolls of coins you buy directly from the United States Mint. What exactly are you looking for? Things like double dies, overdates, misplaced dates, and repunched mint marks. Here's an example. This is a normal 1901 Barber dime. You see the O mint mark at the bottom of the reverse under the words 1 dime. This tells us the coin was made at the New Orleans Mint. In very fine condition, this normal coin might be worth about $45 or so. If you find one with the O mint mark repunched over a horizontal O, it's a rare die variety worth about 4 times what you'll pay for it. Here's a coin that you should examine closely whenever you see one in a dealer's case. This is a normal 1919 Mercury dime worth a few dollars in lower grades. These photos compare the lettering on a 1919 Mercury dime struck from normal dies to one that was struck from a doubled obverse die. The doubling on this variety shows clearly on the lettering of In God We Trust. This is a new listing in the 6th edition of the Cherry Picker's Guide, where it's valued at $2,500 in very good condition. So basically, you buy this coin for the price of a cup of coffee, and you sell it for about a month's rent. I want to talk a little bit about how doubled dies happen. These are one of the more popular types of die varieties. There are many others, but this will give you a feel for some of the mechanical things that go into how certain die varieties occur. Some collectors assume that doubling on a coin happens when a planchet is accidentally struck twice during minting. This isn't the case. Coins made for circulation, like here at the Philadelphia Mint, are struck only once in the coining press. The doubling actually occurs when the die itself is made for production. This is what's called a nonsense die, or at the Mint they call it a Martha, because they use a portrait of Martha Washington. So this is not an actual coin, but it's a real die. They use it to make samples and things. So dies are the hardened steel cylinders that are used to stamp designs onto planchets or discs of metal to turn them into coins. To understand how a coin ends up with doubling, we need to know how dies are made. What I'm about to discuss is the way US coins were minted from about the 1830s to about the 1980s. A lot of the process is basically the same today, though now there's more computerized work, and almost all of the machinery has been modernized. This is John Sinek working on a Roosevelt dime plaster around 1946. This illustrates that after a coin was designed by an artist, the portrait, other design elements, these designs would be modeled through several stages, and eventually they're sculpted into a large plaster, much bigger than the size of the coins to be produced. These are plasters of the American Platinum Eagle. Here's a plaster of the American Silver Eagle. And this plaster, or this photo, shows a bronzed plaster of Frank Gasparo's rejected design for the small dollar coin in the late 1970s, which of course became the Susan B. Anthony dollar. Okay, so you've got a plaster that the artist has created. The plaster would be treated with hot wax and copper powder and then electroplated. This formed an outer copper shell known as a galvano. The galvano was removed from the plaster and solidified with a strong, heavy backing, usually lead. Next step in the process, a Janvier machine or a similar pantograph was used to reduce the image on the galvano to the actual size of the coin. The Janvier had two arms, one applied to the galvano and one to the end of a blank cylindrical steel bar. The end of this steel bar was the size of the coin. The Janvier traced the design of the large galvano and carved the same design onto the end of the steel bar. This created what's called a master hub with the design in relief like the coin would be. The master hub was placed into a press opposite a blank steel bar. Several hundred tons of pressure would be applied to force or squeeze the master hub into the steel bar, making what's called a master die. This is like a negative of the coin with everything backward and incuse. This photo is from the Philadelphia Mint. It shows a display of hubs, dies, and other tools, and I'll show close-ups of some of these in a moment. So it always took more than one impression of the master hub into the blank steel to produce a satisfactory image on the master die. For example, a Morgan dollar die might require up to 12 impressions under great pressure. Between these impressions, the working die would be removed from the hubbing press, heated in an annealing oven, and then carefully realigned into the press for its next impression. This was the point in the process where a double die might occur, the first point in the process. If the master hub and the master die weren't properly and precisely realigned between those impressions. The master die was used to create several working hubs, and the working hubs would then produce many working dies. And the working dies are the dies that are actually put into the coinage presses and used to create coins. So accidental doubling of a die could occur at stages 8, 9, and or 10, as spelled out here. Let's look at some photos of hubs and dies now. This is an obverse hub for an American silver eagle. The design elements are positive and in relief. This is an obverse die for an American silver eagle. Note the design elements are backward and the design is incuse or sunk below the surface of the die. This is a hub for the reverse of the Roosevelt dime. And this is a tray of steel bars that will be hubbed to become working dies. This is a box of working dies. An average die for a Roosevelt dime might strike about 400,000 coins before it would be retired because of metal fatigue or other failure. But that doesn't mean that every double die would necessarily create 400,000 coins. Usually a mint worker would spot the mistake in coins as they're coming off the press, and they'd be able to stop the machine quickly and replace the die. They would gather up the coins that had resulted from that error and recycle them so that they don't enter circulation. But of course, not all of them are caught. Let's look at a famous double die that slipped past quality control. First, this is a normal 1955 wheat cent. The Philadelphia Mint made about 330 million of them that year. That's about one for every man, woman, and child in the United States today. So quite a lot of coins. It's common. It's worth about $1 even in uncirculated grades. You can find it on the bourse. It's not expensive. Here we see one of the most famous die variety coins, the 1955 double die obverse cent, sometimes called a DDO. It's a very famous coin, been in the Red Book for a long time. Historian Q. David Bowers told me about his research into these coins. He learned from the Philadelphia Mint that one day in 1955, several coinage presses were operating, making pennies, and the coins from each press were dumped into boxes and then mixed together with coins from all the other presses. Late in the afternoon, an inspector noticed the strongly doubled coins coming off one press. It's kind of hard to miss. Look at the date and other elements. He stopped the machine to replace the double die. By that time, though, more than 40,000 double die cents had been produced. And of those, about 24,000 were mixed in with normal cents from other presses. Now what do? They had to make a decision. They decided to recycle the 16,000 or so coins that were still in the hopper and to allow the other 24,000 mixed in with normal coins to be released into circulation. They were considered defects. They knew that they were errors, but nobody thought that Joe Sixpack would notice or care. They just go into circulation and be spent as normal cash. Of course, the rest is history. Coin collectors did notice them very quickly. Antiques dealer and historian Kenneth Rendell tells this story about Ken Brissett, who in 1955 was not yet editor of the Red Book, but both of them were active as collectors and researchers. He's told me, quote, "My earliest memory of Ken was a telephone call with him in 1955 when he was living in Keene, New Hampshire. And I was telling him about the oddity Lincoln pennies that had turned up in Boston circulation with a double die date. They were selling for 25 cents. As we were talking, Ken reached into his pocket and found that he had several of them. It was indeed the good old days. I don't think you'd be able to find a 1955 DDO in pocket change. Mike, I don't know, maybe you have, but no. So how many of these double die obverse coins still exist? Dave Bowers estimates about 4,000. They sell for at least $1,000 in circulated grades. And of course, the higher the grade, the more valuable the coin. This particular coin sold a few years ago for more than $30,000. And I believe it's I think it was from the Pogue collection, so it's one of the finest known. So mechanical defects, accidents of human error, these are what cause double dies, triple dies, misplaced dates, over mint marks, and other die varieties. Whenever a working die with a mistake on it is put into production, there's a risk that some of its coins will escape detection and get out of the mint and enter circulation. These are the rare and valuable coins that cherry pickers look for today. Cherry picking is alive and well. It's a vibrant part of the hobby. New discoveries are constantly being made. Now, this is an educational talk and not an infomercial, but you can't talk about cherry picking without talking about the Cherry Picker's Guide, the book that really brought this part of the hobby into the mainstream. Here we have Bill Fiva and the late J.T. Stanton. In the 1980s, they were both interested in die varieties, which had slowly been gaining interest in the hobby for 10 or 20 years. Both of them were from Georgia. JT was down in Savannah, and I believe Bill was in Dunwoody at the time. So Bill and JT gathered their knowledge, and in 1989, they co-authored and self-published the first Cherry Picker's Guide, listing about 160 varieties. It debuted at the January 1990 Florida United Numismatists Convention and was an immediate hit. People were captivated by the idea of finding treasure among common coins, and interest in die varieties skyrocketed. They sold out 500 copies of the new book at the 1990 Fun Show. Within 10 months, they'd sold the entire print run of 3,000 copies. That's a remarkable amount of sales for a self-published book in any field. With word of mouth and publicity in the coin newspapers, demand quickly grew for a second edition with more listings and the addition of retail values. The second edition sold out 5,000 copies in 6 months. It shows you the popularity of this burgeoning new field. And by this time, the professional grading services had started using Feva-Stanton attribution numbers on their slabs. The third edition brought new challenges. Bill and JT both had full-time jobs and couldn't continue self-publishing. Bowers and Morena signed on to publish the Cherry Picker's Guide for them. The third edition featured about 5 times as many varieties as the first. It went into 6 printings and more than 28,000 copies before the fourth edition came out. Bill and JT got back into self-publishing with the fourth edition, and this was their largest effort up to that point. The book had to be divided into 2 volumes to accommodate the spiral binding. Volume 1 included half cents through nickels. The fourth edition, Volume 2, was published by Whitman Publishing in 2006. This was shortly after I started at Whitman. And it picked up with half dimes through larger denominations. And since that time, the Cherry Picker's Guide has continued to expand. It's currently in its 6th edition, which will be published in 3 volumes. The Cherry Picker's Guide is not the only reference book on dye varieties, but it offers a good case study, and we'll take a look at some others in a moment. It offers a good case study in how to think about and organize these coins. Let's take a look. This is a sample entry in the Cherry Picker's Guide. This coin is a new listing in the 6th edition, Volume 2. It's a 1966 Roosevelt dime found in that year's special mint sets. The listing shows the kind of information to look for and understand when you're cherry picking. Not just the physical aspects of the coin, but also its market conditions, how much it's worth, and related factors. At the top left, you have the coin's date and a note that it's found in the 1966 special mint set. In other words, you won't find this particular dye variety among regular pocket change coins. That information helps you target where and how to look for it. The variety name might be double die obverse or repunched mint mark or a similar description. In the case of this dime, it's 5 on cheek. In the Cherry Picker's Guide, the PUP, P-U-P, is the variety's pickup point. That's the main area of the coin where you want to direct your attention. In this case, it's President Roosevelt's cheek. URS, I, and L stand for Universal Rarity Scale, Interest Factor, and Liquidity Factor. The Universal Rarity Scale was developed by Dave Bowers as a system for communicating how rare or common a coin is. URS 1 means that there's only one known to exist, it's unique. URS 5, as seen in this example, means an estimated 9 to 16 are known to exist or thought to exist. So this rating can change as more examples of a variety are discovered and publicized as research continues. That's not a fixed number necessarily. The interest factor is a measure of how much demand the variety has. An interest factor of 1 would mean very low interest with only very specialized collectors interested in the variety. An interest factor of 5 rates as very high interest with most general collectors interested in the coin. The liquidity factor is a rating of how quickly or how easily a variety should sell, given normal market conditions. 5 is the highest, indicating that this Roosevelt dime will sell easily and often above the listed value. These factors, of course, are often interrelated. If a coin is very rare, that can increase collector interest. And if a lot of collectors want the coin, its liquidity will increase. The strong demand for this 1966 dime variety and its relative rarity are reflected in the prices it brings. The normal coin is worth a few dollars, even in very high grades. The die variety is worth hundreds of dollars, definitely worth looking for. So check those 1966 special mint sets in your collection. Don't assume that all old die varieties from the 1800s and 1900s have already been discovered. The 1919 double die dime that we saw earlier is actually a fairly recent discovery. A collector noticed its doubling and he kept it in his neat box with other oddities. It wasn't published or publicized until 2015, after the original owner sold it to a friend who posted pictures online and started asking questions. Research is ongoing for all of the classic coin series. Earlier this year, Robert Powers published 2 illustrated volumes on die varieties of capped bust half dollars. Also, don't assume that die varieties only occur on older coins. Many current coin series have die anomalies that are very collectible and worth more than normal value. In fact, Ken Potter and Brian Allen focus entirely on current coins in their book, Strike It Rich with Pocket Change, which is now in its 5th edition. This is a normal 2015 Homestead National Monument of America quarter. It's one that you can find in pocket change, worth 25 cents. The design shows a cabin at the National Monument in Nebraska, with an old-fashioned water pump in front of it. The photo on the right is courtesy of Tanner Scott. In this die variety of the same coin, an element that appears to be the handle of the water pump or something is repeated so far to the northeast that it looks like a reflection in the window pane. This might be a double die. Whatever it is, it's caught the attention of collectors. By the way, I mentioned Tanner Scott. He and Daniel Griffin have recently taken over writing for Wexler's die varieties, which you can find online at doubledie.com. Here's an even more recent coin, the Edith Kanakaole $quarter, part of the U.S. Mint's new American Women Quarters program. This coin debuted just a few months ago in March of 2023. In July, a major clashed die error was found and reported to Ken Potter. Here are some photos Ken shared in an article in Numismatic News. In the middle of George Washington's portrait, the first thing that jumps out is the word Edith, almost as if it's tucked under his hair. This is caused by a clashed die, which is die damage that can occur during coining if the press fails to deposit a planchet between the dies and the dies smash together. Coins struck from the damaged dies will end up looking like this until the damage is smoothed away or the die is replaced. This can cause outlines or raised areas of the design on the other side of the coin. Here's a close-up of the pickup point. And Ken Potter says about this coin, quote, "While I am no soothsayer, I have a sneaking suspicion that this variety will elicit strong interest from collectors. As for what its value might be, it is too early to tell, and only supply and demand and auction prices will dictate value." Ken's going to include it in the next edition of Strike It Rich with Pocket Change. And this variety just missed out being included in the latest Cherry Picker's Guide, which went to press shortly before it was publicized. Otherwise, I imagine it would be there. Coin dealer Chris Welch has talked about the surge in collector demand that started about 10 or 15 years ago among die varieties. He has remarked, quote, "I was able to pay off our modest 3-bedroom home in 43 months of payment." He attributes this largely to the proceeds from selling 20th century cherry picker's guide varieties. Bill Fiva has told me about a young man in his coin club who looks through rolls of coins he gets from the internet and from other dealers. And a few months ago, he searched through 2,800 Mercury dimes and found 5 of the 1919 double dies we discussed earlier. The latest Cherry Picker's Guide includes new coin sections and almost 200 new die varieties in volumes 2 and 3 alone. Some of the new sections include Type B reverse Washington quarters, draped bust and capped bust half dollars, long knock Morgan dollars, peg leg Eisenhower dollars, and there will be a new section on U.S. Philippine coins struck from 1903 to 1945. Talk for a moment about today's hobby and the future of cherry picking. The coin market in general has been hot for the past 2 or 3 years. The internet has brought collectors together. Hobbyists have unprecedented access to information, including high-resolution photographs. Book publishing has experienced a renaissance, and websites make it easy to self-publish, to ask questions, to share ideas, and educate other collectors. Large coin shows like the ANA have been seeing big attendance numbers, with lots of dealers buying and selling. And competitive registry sets run by PCGS and NGC have introduced an element of friendly competition that can drive prices up if 2 hardcore collectors both need the same coin to finish or upgrade their set. Here are a few of my personal observations gleaned from working on the latest Cherry Picker's Guide. A large number of Barber dimes were deleted from the 5th edition of the Cherry Picker's Guide from lack of collector interest. But about a dozen new varieties were added in that series. This illustrates how collector interest ebbs and flows. Gold coins, long overlooked among cherry pickers, are starting to show more significant spread between normal and variety pricing. In the past, collectors wouldn't pay much of a premium for example, a double die St. Gaudens $20 gold piece, because the coin already has such a high intrinsic value. But that's changed a bit in recent years as specialists pay more attention to the rarity of certain gold coin die varieties. Hobby clubs and organizations produce and publish a lot of new research on die varieties. I recommend joining these clubs to learn more and to dive into particular series. One especially helpful group for the latest Cherry Picker's Guide was the Liberty Seated Collectors Club, which studies the coins of the 1830s to the 1890s, including half dimes, dimes, quarter dollars, half dollars, and dollars. Another was the Barber Coin Collectors Society, which studies the coins by Chief Engraver Charles Barber, minted in the late 1800s and early 1900s. If a die variety is if it's included in the Cherry Picker's Guide, it's among the most popular and actively traded in the series. We have a limited amount of space, only so many pages, so we try to focus on what people are interested in and what they're buying and selling. So in the 6th edition, volume 2, most of the new die varieties are among Roosevelt dimes, split evenly between silver and clad issues, Liberty seated quarters, mostly from the 1850s, 60s, and 70s, and Washington quarters, especially the silver series up to 1964. Looking ahead to volume 3, which will come out next year, there are entire new sections on bust half dollars. The most new die varieties are among the Liberty seated half dollars, Franklin half dollars, Morgan silver dollars, and peace dollars. And as I mentioned, there's a new section on U.S. and Philippine die varieties. Less popular coins these days include half dimes in general, 20-cent pieces, trade dollars, and classic commemoratives. There are new varieties listed in these series, but collector interest isn't as high as in other more popular areas. Maybe that's an opportunity, or maybe they'll just be in the doldrums for a while. Here are some resources for cherry pickers. CONECA, of course, the combined organizations of Numismatic Era Collectors of America, conecaonline.org, wonderful resource, great website. I have to recommend, of course, the American Numismatic Association, www.money.org, where you'll find a great amount of information, lists of dealers, and other resources. Specialized groups include the John Wright Collectors Society for early silver, Liberty Seated Collectors Club, as I mentioned, the Barber Coin Collector Society, the Society of Silver Dollar Collectors. All of these organizations have presences on the web, and you'll probably find them down on the bourse today. Among websites, Variety Vista is invaluable. It's maintained by Dr. Wiles, has great photographs, close-ups of everything that you'll want to see in certain series. Wexler's Die Varieties, I mentioned before, doubledie.com, and Facebook and Instagram are also resources and places where people are buying and selling and trading die varieties and learning about them. So that concludes my talk. I hope you've learned a little bit. For a lot of you, this is probably a recap, but I think some of the information on what I've observed working on the Cherry Picker's Guide, I hope that's been helpful for you, maybe giving you some tips. And I hope to see you on the bourse hunting down your next acquisition. I welcome your questions.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
You mentioned about popularity and how you add in remove things. How do you discern what is popular in the market?
That's a good question. The question was, how do you discern what's popular in the market? Larry Briggs is our volume editor for the latest Cherry Picker's Guide. If you know Larry, you know that he is constantly eating, sleeping, breathing, drinking die varieties. He's very active, has been for years, and has worked with the ANA on die varieties. He's got his finger on the pulse of the market. And so we rely a lot on his expertise and his network of collectors and dealers that he knows, just kind of, canvassing and keeping an ear to the ground. Bill Fiva as well is still very active, and he's, he keeps his ear to the ground as well. And just what are people talking about, and what are they looking for? What are they buying? What coins are seeing big prices? So all of that information is constantly coming in and being analyzed.
Thank you.
Yeah. Other questions? Very good. Yes, sir. Yes. He probably was. Ken Brissett over the years has come up with a lot of terminology and nomenclature for coin series, Liberty seated versus seated Liberty and that type of thing. And he tends to shy away from giving coins cute nicknames, but that's actually something that comes with the die variety cherry picking scene. Mike can probably talk about some of those, spitting eagles and scar faces and things like that. But yes, I'm not sure of that, but I imagine Ken probably did come up with that terminology. Any others? Well, thank you again for your time.
And Dennis, on behalf of the American Numismatic Association, I have a certificate for you that reads American Numismatic Association World's Fair of Money Show. This certificate of appreciation is presented to Dennis Tucker for contributing to the advancement of numismatics by sharing his knowledge of cherry picking rare coins in 2023 and beyond. Thank you, Dennis.
Thank you very much.